think you would struggle to find a New Zealander who isn't sympathetic to the tough conditions nurses have worked under throughout the pandemic, and let's be honest, before COVID as well. In my opinion, nurses are underpaid, understaffed, and clearly undervalued by this government and previous governments. However, I do have 2 aunties, several cousins, and a sister who is learning to be a nurse, so I may be a tad influenced by them. The NZNO, New Zealand Nursing Organisation, is the largest nursing union in New Zealand, representing about 55,000 nurses. And this week, the NZNO and its members decided they want to take the proposed DHB nursing pay equity settlement to the Employment Relations Authority. This decision was made due to widespread concern from members and other affected DHB employees that the DHB were not honouring an agreement signed last year that each employee would receive back pay on the basis of the new rates to 31 December 2019. I'm joined now by NZ Nursing Organisation's Chief Executive, Paul Goulter.
Kia ora.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I think there's never a dull moment probably in your job with so many nurses relying on your advocacy. Could you run through the circumstances that have led to this decision to refer the settlement to ERA?
Okay. Before I do that, all the best to all your whānau that are tied up in nursing. Often the way, families, it travels through families. It must be in the genes or something. So all of the best.
Thank you.
For that. So, yeah, this pay equity thing is really interesting, and it's got a lot of history on it. It's been going since really 2017, 2018, and obviously there's a long-standing gender discrimination has gone on in nursing. So, in order to settle 2 lots of collective agreements, the government agreed that they would provide back pay. So, nurses at least knew that whatever happened, however long it took, the clock was running on the back pay. So when the draft proposed agreement was surfaced just prior to Easter, and there wasn't full back pay on it, lots of our members just got really antsy about it. And so I was just new in the job then, and I thought, I don't know what's gone on in the past, but I'll get someone who's an expert to review to see what the obligations of the parties really were. Now, he went through it and he came out and he said, yeah, your folk are right. There is a legal obligation to pay full back pay back to 2019. And then 2 other issues surfaced. Our senior nurses had an issue about their evaluations, and also the review mechanism we think was flawed. But we never got to the point of a final proposed settlement. This was still in draft because the legal thing on the backdating kicked in. So we said to our members, you're right, and therefore we gave them 2 options about which way to go. We could go direct to the Employment Relations Authority for a decision, or we could try and tidy it up and take it to ratification. Our nurses said, no, overwhelmingly, take it to the Employment Relations Authority. We're sick and tired of this thing. Get the thing sorted and get someone to make a decision on it. And we understand that's risky, but that's
what they wanted.
Yeah. It's taken so damn long. Everyone is sick of it, but they're still out there fighting for their justice. And after COVID, of course, and the wonderful job they've done there, it's widely and deeply felt. So what happened is that decision is now to take it to the Employment Relations Authority. We're in the midst of getting the papers drafted up, and we're going to go hard for it. The point about this is not just the DHBs, the hospitals. This is going to impact right across the sector, so nurses in primary health care, Māori and iwi providers, aged care, etc. Once those rates are struck, we're going to go hard so every nurse gets access through a pay parity mechanism to those. It's not fair to have it just for one group of nurses and not for the others.
So what kind of money are we talking here? What would an average nurse be looking at getting if that back payment went through?
This is really hard to determine because every nurse works different shifts and everything. It's been really hard. But the total figure, and the Minister has actually quoted, I've heard he has quoted a figure higher than this, but we think it comes in around about 600 million. But we haven't got the exact data on it because we need to sit down with the employers, the DHBs, to work that out. But it's a huge figure. We fully accept that. And but if that's what's required to correct gender discrimination, well, that's what you've got to do.
I've listened to a handful of interviews with Health Minister Andrew Little, and although he can come across a bit of a grump at the best of times, he seems very frustrated that you won't just accept the deal, and he maintains that there was no agreement to backdate to December 2019. He's suggesting you've pulled a swift one on him. What do you say to that?
Well, I think there's a couple of points. First of all, the Minister has said in the past there was a settlement and the union has pulled back from it. There, in fact, was no settlement. And the documentation shows that at best there was a draft proposal that hadn't been worked up even to the state that it could have gone to our members for ratification. That's the first thing. The second thing is the employer side, and it's not just the Minister, says that there was no agreement for back pay to pay the full back pay. We say there was. That's the fight, and that's what goes to the Employment Relations Authority to make a decision on, because fundamentally we can yell at each other, we can throw press releases at each other. Someone's got to make the call on it.
Exactly. I can imagine that it is a bit disappointing to encounter so many roadblocks, especially when the Minister of Health is an ex-union boss. Is there frustration that even now with a government that you would expect to be a little bit more friendly to unions, it's such a battle to get compensation or to get fair remuneration for nurses?
Yeah. So first of all, bouquet to the government, this pay equity legislation was theirs, and they brought that through, so that's a really big tick, I think. But boy, our nurses, and I've been in hospitals over the last few weeks, I know how they feel. They're tired, they're worn out, but they're also angry because they feel that something's been taken away from them. Well, we're not going to accept that, but if depends which way the Employment Relations Authority rules, but our members are prepared to go to the line on this, and there's not going to be strikes or anything, so the public don't have to worry about that. But fundamentally, this workforce needs to have this fixed. It's not going to fix all the problems in nursing.
No.
And it's not going to fix the nursing crisis, but it will be a big part of the fix, and we need to get things like education and registration and immigration. And there was a very contentious announcement yesterday
we'll
about
that.
Okay, all right, we'll save that one. Came up, yeah. So it's a lot of things that are needed to fix.
Yep. Traditionally, a fair assumption could be made that a Labour government is more friendly to unions and nurses than a national government. How does this Labour government compare to previous Labour governments in terms of engaging with unions and kind of advancing work conditions?
Okay, so I'm not sure about the nursing side of it, but I can talk about more generally because I came out of the teachers' union. It has made a real effort to engage with unions and working people, and I've got to take my hat off to them for that. There's genuinely trying to shift the dial on that and recognising the role of workers and organised labour in this economy. And so it's always going to get scratchy at the margins, and I think we just accept that. But fundamentally, directionally, they have made a real effort, and I think they need to be congratulated for that.
And you mentioned before that the legislation that they passed with the pay equity, we have seen claims go through from other female-dominated sectors. So I think care and support workers have had a settlement. They seem to have some really good intentions in this space, and it is classic Labour-style policy. Why do you think that this particular set of negotiations, nursing, has been such a sticking point for them and I guess in negotiations? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I mean, I was heavily involved in the teacher aid pay equity settlement and in those sorts of areas, and this one has sort of landed in a bad space. It was actually initiated, I think, even prior to the 2017 Labour coalition government. So it goes back through a number of iterations, and I think just the length of time and the different processes that have been adopted have really led us to where we are at the moment, where some of the later settlements have been more focused, and the legislation has been really clear. This one started actually before the legislation was in place, and then fitted into the legislation. And I think ultimately this is a massive settlement. That's a lot of money, and so everyone's ultra cautious. We get frustrated because all the government agencies, they need to tick it off. It's really like eye-watering. That's the business of government. They probably say the same about us, but fundamentally the government does have to take care that it's done the right way. But this is going on for years, and it has to be brought to an end, and the employers need to join with us in trying to get urgency on this matter.
Now, as you say, it's a really big sum of money that we're looking at, if we're looking at around 600 million. When we look at some of the spending decisions of this government, I think a lot of Kiwis would say that they'd rather that the nurses get their due than some of the other stuff that we see spent on. I've just jotted a few down here, 197 million on a comms campaign for Road to Zero, and that's just the communications. 800,000 on job expos that only 126 people attended. 4.5 million for a super rugby team, all these kind of things. This is really about priorities, isn't it? The government can find money, so surely they just need to prioritise the nurses.
Yeah, obviously we agree with. I'll tell you a story about that. There's a lovely cafe near where I live, and the father of the woman who runs it turns up every day to help out, and he does front of house, and he's really good. He comes out of a very senior retail position, so very, has been around a long time. And so we go, I sort of met him and I was in there the other day, and he sort of beckoned, he's come over here, Paul. And so I went over, and he put his arm around me, and I thought, okay, we're going to do the great man hug sort of stuff. And he said, I know you can't say anything about this, Paul, but I'm saying give the nurses what they want. And he said, I'm saying to everyone that comes in here, I don't want you to say anything about it, but you just need to know I'm telling everyone, give the nurses what they want. Yeah. And I think that's indicative.
I honestly think that most New Zealanders, especially after the pandemic, feel like nurses need a better go. And obviously we're going to talk about the immigration thing.
Yep.
Because that plays into the staffing issue as well. Because not only were these people, most women, incredibly underpaid, I consider them to be. They also were working in conditions where they were understaffed or having to work extra shifts and very exhausted, as you say. So I think you would struggle to find a New Zealander who would have a bad word to say about the nursing workforce. In terms of this immigration situation, I actually invited you on just to talk about the equity settlement, and then the announcement happened with immigration. I thought, okay, I'm going to talk to him about that as well, because the nurses were left off. And I think, the doctors are there. Where are the nurses? Did they engage with anyone in the sector or the unions, or is this all a big surprise for everyone?
Well, you asked the question, where are the nurses? I mean, we were gobsmacked, and right across people involved in nursing, it's the same. What happened? We were not contacted and we were not consulted, okay? And I've talked to other groups and trying to find out who was actually talked to on the, if you like, the working side of it, the worker side of it, and we can't find it. But how could you, anyway, it's difficult to say because it's so gobsmacking.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It really is. You think the amount of discussion we've had across the COVID pandemic about understaffing of nurses, we desperately need more nurses. And not only are we, the government's putting them through this pay issue, but now there's not the solution that other sectors are getting for staffing issues. Honestly, aren't we just asking them to just head off to Australia for better pay and better conditions?
Absolutely. This is a global market. Our borders are opening. these people, these nurses will go. Australia is way better and way easier for them to work in. Their qualifications are recognised. That's the Trans-Tasman qualifications. That's the right thing to do. So you've got to expect that to happen. But we cannot just keep covering these gaps by importing nurses from overseas. What's wrong with our supply side, in other words, our education and training side, that we can't get enough of our own nurses to work? And that gap has been going on for years, I understand. So why has it been allowed to continue like this? We can't just keep using immigrant labour to fill these gaps. We need it at the moment to deal with it. But fundamentally, we've got to turn the training and the access to training around, and that requires a whole lot of different things to happen. I don't know why it hasn't started before now.
I know, it is, I think, frustrating. It must be very frustrating for you and those in the industry or the sector. But even from the outside, I think a lot of people are just like, how this seems to be a no-brainer. We need to pay them more and we need to make conditions better. I know my little sister's at nursing school, and she often gets the comment, why would you want to be a nurse? You get paid nothing. And so it's almost like it has to be vocational. It has to be like a charitable act to sign up to be a nurse. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And teaching has the same sort of dynamic to it. But we've got to really be careful that we don't keep saying that nursing's a really bad place to be. And I think you're right. It is a vocation. People sign up to care. And it's a great job, and it's very rewarding. It just doesn't need to be quite as hard as it is now. And we want to make all those people who've got that vocation prepared to go in there and work really hard, but they need to be supported and they need to have that recognised. That's not much to ask.
No, I don't think it is. This is probably the most one-sided interview that I've ever done, because I'm in so much agreement. But what are you going to be taking any action in terms of contacting the government about this immigration thing, or is there anything you can do on that?
Yeah, we're meeting the minister next week. Okay. I understand, and we'll raise those concerns, but I'm sure he'll be well aware of them by then. But what we are doing is we launched a major campaign yesterday called Maranga Mai, which is a Rise Up. And so our members are so frustrated that we've got to start getting out there and getting solutions focused, getting some answers in place, not just sitting
being angry.
Being angry, nice for a while, but we've got to convert that to hope and into action. And so that campaign yesterday is really about that, and our members all over the Malta really grabbed that and they said, give us some hope, give us some actions. And so, for example, you'll see a lot more nurses on the streets making their views and the solutions really clear and engaging with the public around that.
And I encourage our listeners to give them a toot if they see them with their signs. And I think one of the really clear things for me during the pandemic was when they had planned a strike of some kind, but things were so bad that they cancelled it to just look after people.
Yep.
And that says a lot, because they have been waiting so long to get proper recognition, proper pay, and yet they recognised this is a really bad time for us to do this because people need us. All right, let's just, put it on pause and get back to work. And I thought that was quite amazing.
They're professional, they're dedicated, and their patients matter to them. It doesn't matter whether they're in a hospital, in primary health, Māori, iwi, aged care. Their patients matter to them, and as a vocation, they'll always put them first. And maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, true. That is very true, actually. Maybe they need to put themselves first. But thank you so much for coming in to talk to me about this. And I know that so many of our listeners are cheering the nurses on and would like to see them get some better conditions. And I know that a lot of my family members are, so thank you.
No, it's great to be here, and good luck with the station. I think it's a really great initiative.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks very much.